Right, are we live? Okay, so this week's Q&A. This is where I give out, if you haven't seen it before, I answer questions from everybody that's in the course, the I Will Teach You to Master course that I've got running. And yeah, this is, all these guys are now coming on high. So yeah, let's get cracking. Right, first up is, let's see. Happy Valentine's Day. Don't talk to me about it, I forgot. And the wife's going to kill me because I forgot to get anything this morning, so I'm in trouble. Right, anyone got any questions to fire at me, seeing it is a Q&A? She wants a limiter. I don't think she does. Last thing she needs in her life. What she needs is someone who works in the stock market. That'll cheer her up. I guess, Steve, I guess I'll start. Crack on then, Steve. The course is getting better. Thanks, Angel. What week are you on, Angel? How do you know when you are destroying a song? You need to make sure you're A-Bing all the time. That's the main thing. Because you need to be able to then hear the before and after is the key to hearing if you're smashing it to death. You need, as long as you're not going, you should be all right. As long as you're like -10 to -8 RMS, you're usually okay. But then you need to be listening to the before to see if your snares and stuff are getting smashed. Dither. Dither. Do I use plugins for that? Isotope, if I need to dither anything. But I tend not to dither. I try to keep everything as it was at 24-bit, really, if I have to. Hey man, finally got a break to make it here for this. Nice one, Nate. Nice to have you on board. Ben, hi. Matthew, sorry. I guess you're Matt. Does dither really matter now? Yeah, it does make a massive difference when you, especially if you're doing dynamic tracks. If you listen to the bit, it does change it a lot. It's exactly the same now as it's ever been, really. So it hasn't really changed. But it depends how dynamic the music is that you're doing. So just check different dither settings out. Did anybody get on the? I know we're always talking about equipment. Did anyone buy the cream from Teglia for the discount that I got? Which I thought was a pretty good discount. Yes, you did. Oh, great. What gear am I checking out? Analog software. I've got. Coming back in, I've got the Silver Bullet, Louder Than Liftoff, coming back because I had that ages ago, and after having the Fusion, I've got that coming back in. I've got these PMCs at the moment. Grab us one of those PMCs, would you? I'll talk about it on here and then cut it for the video. What gear am I currently checking out? Yeah, so I'm checking out, that's what I've got in at the moment, the PMC monitors and the Louder Than Liftoff. Your settings on the Lyra for this week was 44.1. Is that what you use? Yeah, I use, it depends on the track. I use all sample free. A lot of the time I use 96, I must admit. And I upsample to 96 a lot. But mainly I'm using it at the sample rate it comes in at, just because sometimes it doesn't sound good if you upsample, but yeah, I do use it. Notice the +3 17 on the VU. Is there a reason that it's that instead of normal RMS? I don't know what you're talking about. I usually have it on RMS, not anything else, so I don't know whereabouts that was. It was wrong if it was, because I usually have it on RMS. Any word on SonarWorks discount? I haven't looked into it, sorry, I will do. Hi Jesse. Nate, when you're gain staging into a limiter to set your level, do you leave any headroom for adding frequencies you got back, or adjust after the colour changes? I.e., if you had a few dB somewhere in the EQ, you start hitting your comps harder, do you just back down the comps? Yeah, that's exactly it. So I'm getting my level, and then I'm shaping it after that, and then I'll be moving the gain around depending on how hard it's hitting a compressor, you know, if I've got an EQ before a compressor and it starts adding a bit more, and then the compressor starts moving a bit more, then obviously I will then adjust, say, the input to the EQ so that it's not pushing against the compressor so much, so then the compressor doesn't move, or I'll change the threshold obviously on the compressor. So it's kind of juggling it as you go, but just making sure that you're keeping the end level right. So this one here, I'm checking these out at the moment. Is anyone interested in these? Anyone thinking about those? PMCs? Weisse, what do you mean when you say that the mix has so many overtones and no left place to be loud? Some mixing guys said that if there is more saturation overtones, the better. Still keep a self-fusion or silver bullet? I don't know. I'll tell you when I get the silver bullet. I haven't kept the fusion. The fusion's no good for me mastering, really. It's not. I don't think it's right. It's a bit noisy, and the EQ's all right, but it hasn't got that much on it to use. The drive's okay, but it's noisy, and the pots aren't stepped, so they need to make a mastering version, I think, for mastering guys. It's pretty good for mixing, but not for mastering. Streaky, do you use the DS1 as a compressor? No. If so, where is it in your channel? I don't use it. I've never been a fan of the Weisse compressor, mainly because it's too bloody hard to use. So I just binned it off. I'd rather use something else. I mean, I'm sure it's brilliant if you know how to dial into the settings, but my life's too short to do that. And I've tried a few times and looked through the manual, and I've tried all the little Bobcat settings and all those sort of things, and it didn't excite me. So I just binned it off and moved on. So no, not really. The only thing I ever used the DS1 for when I had one was for the de-esser, and now they've got that de-esser in a plug-in, so I'm using that a lot. Hi Jesse. Are you hybrid system? Analog out seams before all the plugins. So do you intermix, i.e. backs plugin first, then cream hardware and back software for limiting? Yeah, kind of. I've got a hardware back, so I tend to use the hardware backs. I come out of the system and then I use my backs and whatever's in my chain, and then I come back in and then I do my limiting, and I might do some multi-band compression at that stage, and I might put an EQ before I go into my analog chain just to play around with stuff. It really depends on the track and what I'm doing, but that's how I kind of integrate my system for hybrid. I can put something before and after the analog chain, but I tend to just use the analog chain and then use the for a lot of the kind of shelving and glue and colour, and then I go back in and do some more kind of limiting and pushing around after that. Jackson, what do you think of MS on analog EQ? I have the Dangerous Master Console and SPL PQ, and I've been using it in MS mode. It feels like it's changing the phase. It will do, but while using it, it's in very little amounts, maybe stereo width. Yeah, I mean, I've always used MS EQ on analog EQs, and I like it a lot. You can really tuck into mixes and stuff, but you have to be, as you say, quite gentle with it and not too full on, because it can really ruin someone's mix. It's okay to kind of ruin someone's mix if the mix is crap, but if the mix is good, you end up doing all the stuff you're doing and then taking it off in the end, because you get to the point where you're doing stuff and you're before and after, going back to the question earlier, and you're going before and after and you're hearing that what you're doing isn't as good as what was before, so you end up taking everything off, and that's why you end up not using so much. But and it takes ages to realise that the mix was actually all right. So it's I think that's kind of, I use MSEQ. I go through that in the course quite a lot about MSEQ and how I'm using it. So just in the EQ section I talk about it, and when I'm mastering tracks you'll see me using it. Yeah, the SPL PQ, I couldn't get on with that at all. I had one in for demo, but it's quite tricky, isn't it? Like, it's got a lot of it's like the little things ruined my brain. They were just quarter turns on the gain. It doesn't take much to obviously confuse me, but I'm so used to half dB stages rather than quarters, and then there was like I don't know, it was just a bit too much. I've done a video on it, check it out. They all sound good. Dangerous Master Console's good, I checked that out, I had that in at some point. All Dangerous stuff's good, really. Oliver, when mastering, would you master differently taking into consideration where it's going to be played, i.e. club system? Would you just overall? Yes and no. Sometimes you might leave some bass on for a club if somebody, but a lot of the time if it's a track that's going to radio, you're going to kind of trim the bass and tighten it up a little bit more anyway. It's not going to have as much sub, but I always kind of master just one sound, and that sound should work for any scenario, because usually if it's going to a club or if it's a dance track, it's going to have loads of sub in it, and if you take the sub out, you haven't got much left of the track. So yes and no. You don't. A lot of cars and every playback systems can handle sub now, so it's not like it's 1980 and you've got a really tinny thing and it's cutting it off. So, you know, a lot of, and you know, saying that though, a lot of systems, if you haven't got the speakers, will just not play the sub anyway, so I don't think it's too much of an issue. I've always just done one master and that's it, really. I may cut that differently if it was on vinyl, because vinyl I would be trimming and doing different things. But no, it's similar, same thing really for all. Second question, my biggest issue is getting air without unpleasant top. Any tips for where you start with this? I find that I end up with a lot more dynamic EQ multiband than I see other engineers use, and I'm typically only getting halfway there. If you're adding air, you need to be using an EQ that's a nice EQ to add air, because air needs to, with digital EQs in the box stuff, unless it's a decent one, it's going to sound really thin and not warm enough. So I tend to use analog EQ to get some air more than I would use digital. But if I was using digital, I would use something like the Manly, or the or there's that what's the slate one, the Ilios Air EQ, isn't it? Yeah, literally the Air EQ. So that I've used that. That sounds nice. I don't think the Fab Filter's all right, but it's not got that kind of luxury sound that you want. So a lot of that kind of luxury sound comes from analog stuff, really, or you know, good emulations of analog. I'm really into the Manly one, which I think sounds good. Ben, heard many good things about the DMG Audio Equilibrium. Have you used it? I haven't. Or do you swear by the L2? L2 is just really standard procedure. It can handle loads of level. You can tweak it a bit to change the sound. You just know you can get a result from it straight away. So it's just really quick and easy to use. So that's why I use that a lot. I'll check out that Equilibrium and let you know what I think. How you manage to recall an Avalon 747? I just take photographs in Evernote. I think I mentioned that in the course in the setup, where I take photographs and use them in Evernote, and I just try and get it as close as I can on the 747 by using my ear. You're talking probably about the more about the EQ itself. So yeah, I use that quite lightly anyway. Should master a club be duller than other masters? No, just master one track the same for everything and it should be okay. You don't really want to master something dull anyway, because it's just not going to be lively. The word dull says what it is, really. It's dull. So you want it to be lively but not too bright, so it's ripping people's heads off. But if you can kind of keep that in mind of how things are tizzy and not, you just need to keep things open, really. What kind of brand of diffuser is behind me? I don't know, because I bought this from a guy who had set up some ridiculous studio that had gone skint, and then he was selling off loads of stuff. I don't know, it was quite an expensive one, but I got it quite cheap. and I painted it white, obviously, because everything's white. But yeah, it weighs a ton. It's ridiculously heavy, but that's what you want, really. Equilibrium is an EQ, and the limiter is limitless. Yeah, I know. I thought that equilibrium. It kind of says equilibrium. You're right, Jesse. I'll check them both out, though. I have heard about that limitless, though, that it's quite good, but I haven't played enough with it. You do many reviews. Please have a look at the Millennia 4. Okay, is that the plugin you're talking about there? Or the hardware? I used to have the hardware version with the Fred Fosel tweaks in it a long time ago. I liked it, but I had other stuff at the time, so I binned it. I also had a GML 9.5 and a Masalek at the time, so it was like EQ mental. So it's not it's the hardware. Okay, yeah, no, it's yeah, it's nice. Yeah, I'll get one in again and try it out again, because why not? I take it you've got one and you like it. Is that so, Jesse? You say that there's a new one called Multiplicity. It's a multi-band on steroids. So that's just that's their multi-band, is it? Is it? I guess that's DMG too. Okay, so Aaron, should you adjust the mix? Okay, I take it you're mastering a club track at the moment. Should you adjust it if -8 RMS can't be reached via basic limiting for a club track? You should be able to reach -8 RMS on a club track. If you can't, you're doing something wrong, Aaron. So I would suggest following the course a bit tighter. And if you're pushing RMS, it sounds like you've probably got too much bass going on that's taking energy out for you to be able to lift the track. If you're, it's very difficult to know without hearing, but that's probably the reason, is that you've got a lot of bass going on and you're trying to push the track into a limiter and you're just hearing loads of distortion. So try and quell the subs. Okay, Pro Q. Yeah, I love the Pro Q3 at the moment. That's really good. I'll try the Equilibrium then. Did you use the mid-band on your MLA3? No, I never did really. I only used the top for a de-esser, and I used the bottom to tighten up the bass. Brilliant on the low end. I used to use is it 100 hertz is the lowest one on the bottom of the Masalek MLA3, and then I would use 6 as the crossover point at the top. So yeah, that's how I was using it, and I'd always use the top end boost as well. And that kind of that's how I got that working. It's brilliant sounding multiband. Could I be your assistant, if you like? What do you think about that, Matt? Yeah, Matt's more than happy to clear off. He's had enough of me bantering on for all the time. 8 RMS should barely be hitting the limiter. Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, well, you say that. I mean, -8 RMS, you're going to be pulling quite a bit of gain into the limiter, I would have thought. I am most of the time. But, you know, it depends on the track. Depends on if it's a dance track, then you should be able to get -6 at a push, literally. What are your top 3 speakers? Nearfield, midfield, main monitors. What do you want to know, Antonio? Is it true that most studios in London record, mix and master at 48? A friend of mine lives in London and told me he doesn't see the point of going just extra 4K. I don't think that there's no standard for what people are doing. I know mix engineers that give me stuff at 96, and I know mix guys that give us stuff at 44.1. I don't think there's not a rule for that. There's not a London thing. It's just a bit of whatever track you're doing, whoever's recording and whoever knows what they're doing. Some people will give me upsampled versions of 44.1 and tell me it's 96, and it's not, obviously not recorded truly at 96, but yeah, it doesn't really matter. Would you cut from, let's say, 20 hertz at like 96k slope to make more room to push the level? Sometimes it takes away feeling of the track a little. Yeah, you've got to watch that, Steve, because taking away 20 hertz, you might have some sub stuff going on at 20 hertz. Say if it's a drum and bass track or things. I used to cut at 20 hertz and the guys would go crazy at me. But what you need to do then is, if you want to cut at 20 hertz to get rid of kind of waffle and tighten up, just put a little bit above it at like 50 hertz, just so you still get that feel and you get some of that movement in the subs. But you've got to cut at 20 so that it's, you know, just keeping the bass tighter. So you should get a tighter sound by lifting around 40. You can even lift it at 30 and do a cut lower, because obviously the shelf is going to be lift. Say you're putting on an EQ like that, and then you cut there. It's not going to be a you know, a straight brick wall cut. It's just going to be fading off. So all you're doing is shaping the low end. And if there's, you know, so if it was going all the way across at 20 hertz and you're shaping it, that's a good thing. If you're lifting then before it at say 30 or 40, because then you're getting a nice rounded shape in the low end rather than just straight across, which is just loads of noise and crap at say 10 hertz, which no one can hear anyway. So it's more about shaping that sub rather than cutting it off totally. While you're talking monitors, what's a good second reference set other than NS10s? I know it's personal preference, but I heard many use mix cubes. I've never used mix cubes for mastering, and wondered if there's any good suggestions to test. Amphions, for the small Amphions are good for that are like NS10s. The small PSIs I really love, the 17s. They're definitely worth looking at for a small monitor. What else? I like the little focal solos. They're good. They're little Nearfields that are good. The head type 20s, they're kind of midfieldy, I suppose. Yeah, I'd go with those. My favourite is the PSI. That sounds brilliant. And you can team that with a bit of a sub if you fancy. But yeah, check those out. Jackson, after you have print the track from the analog chain to your DAW, do you have a second round of user limiters? No, I don't. No, I never do that. I never print or record the track down and then go over it with limiters. No, it all happens at the same time. So I'm going out. I want to be going into the limiters because I'm going to change my EQ settings, because the limiters are making a sound, and a lot of the time the limiters are going to get things brighter. So that's kind of, I'm changing the sound, and I might EQ and change the sound around and move the compression and the gain setup based on what the limiters are sounding like. So I'm not going to limit them after, because it's not as flexible. So all I'm doing is I'm using everything at the same time, whether it's analog or digital, it doesn't matter. I'm just gain staging it up, and then I'm hearing it as one sound. I don't want to then have to then listen to it again and work out some limiter settings. You want to be getting it to the point of the end and then working back and shaping. So that's what happens there. Have you ever worked on the Nautilus 800? I've not worked on them, but I'm sure they're very similar to the 802s, but just more, but louder and more bass. They're brilliant. All those Nautilus spit range is really good. What do you think of the big ass PMCs in Metropolis? PMCs are good in the right room and terrible in the wrong room. So my ones that I had in my room, the room was square and they sounded awful. They had some like wood in between and I just couldn't get a sound on them, which is why I got into listening to loads of other different pairs of speakers. I wasn't allowed to have my B&Ws in there because Metropolis have got a deal with PMC and not with B&W. B&W is it's got a thing with Abbey Road, so the two are kind of fighting against each other. So I wasn't allowed B&Ws. I really like the bass in the BB5s. The bass is tight and fast, and so in the right room it works really well. John's room there sounds brilliant with them, and so does Stuart's. To be fair, Stuart's room sounds really good. But those rooms were built around those speakers because PMC built their whole company off the back of putting speakers into Metropolis, pretty much. That was their first place they built speakers for. They're the original BB5s in there. And so, they built them as the studio was built. So they do sound good in those rooms. And then John and Stuart can get a good result from those speakers. But just couldn't get it working at all. Yeah, it just didn't work for me, so I didn't get into them. I liked the BB5s that we had at Soundmasters years ago, but they were in the wall, soffit mounted, so they didn't sound that great either. But I got into them, I got used to them. You get used to everything really, but ideally, I'm not a massive PMC man really, but they you know, they're good in the right room. Speakers are very room dependent, I think. Hi-fi speakers like these Focals aren't as room dependent. You can move them around a lot easier, so you can kind of shift forwards and backwards and change the response in the room. So it's easier. If you've got a massive set of BB5s, you can't. It's, you know, it's a mission to move them. Salvador finally caught up with the live feed. Good. Hi, Danilo. Sorry. Which top end filter do you use? Fab filter. When you say top end filter, is this for high cut? Is that what you mean? Or do you mean for EQ in general? As in a filter? Explain a little bit more there, Aaron, if you could. What kind of diffuser on the ceiling? Rockwall I'm using on mine. Or Schroeder. No, Rockwall for me. Salvador, have you got any questions? Where are you in the course at the moment? Is there any feedback on the course? I would love to know what you're thinking, how you're getting on with it. If there's anything you want me to add or you think that's missing, any holes in the course would help me out massively to try and make the course better and better for you so you can get more and more out of it. High cut then, Aaron, if you're talking about that. I like the backs, Dangerous Backs. It's got a really nice high cut on it. The Manly, if you're in the box, Manly Massive Passive, I've been checking that out recently a lot. I like that. I don't tend to use the Fab filter for doing that. Because I've kind of done it lower in the chain. Usually I'm cutting before I go into my EQs, so I'm going to cut early on so then I can add later, because I'd rather add some really nice colour and air to the top end and trim it before. So if it's really tizzy or stuff, I'm more likely to do a Weisse and trim that there and maybe do a cut and then add some more EQ later just to kind of polish it up a bit. In your template setup, you print and record into the Pro Tools session. What oversampling setting do you use for your limiters? When I set oversampling 4 or higher, the Fab Filter L2, the track is unplayable, so I work with no oversampling and export and render. Non-real-time. I tend to, I mean, it depends on your processor, doesn't it, to what it can handle, really, for oversampling. I would suggest you oversample. If you're playing at 96, you can probably get away with not oversampling because it's going to play back okay. But I would always try and get at least ×4. I can get on my system, which isn't massive, like 16 ×16. It does sound clearer. It does make the L2 work better. So try and get as high as you can. And I print live, so I'm not doing it on export. I want to hear it. It changes the sound, so I want to hear what it's doing. If I can't hear what it's doing and I have to have it on nothing, then I've got to work around that and try and get the best sound that I can. But usually I can get the oversampling working on stuff, and then I'll mix it up with others. If I can't get it working, then I'll have to take off another plugin or do something with the other plugins to get more power so that I can hear it. Daniel, Sontec 430 EQ for boosting. Yeah, amazing. This one doesn't have as much colour. It doesn't have as much colour as the Manly because it's not valve based and it's not. I used to use there was only 2 settings that I used to use on my Sontec, which was really high, like 20k, and then really low at about 60. The bass on the 432 on the Sontec is just killer. I might get one, but they're mental money. And I don't, you know, for 2 bands, I don't know if it was worth it really. I never used to use. I only used it for that, and that was it. Apart from running through it, in fact, I used to run through it on every track. It had a sound of going through it, which was cool. I've not heard a version of that somebody's, you know, like an emulation of someone that's sounded anywhere near it. So yeah, I think it's a good EQ, but I don't know if it's worth 12 grand. Mr. mentioned the PSI, I guess you mean, 17 as Nearfield. Would you say that you use them for mastering when adding a sub? I would use them for mastering, yeah. I'd be more than happy to use them. I have used them for mastering, but I've used them just for Nearfields, for kind of like focusing in on the mids and then popping out to the mains so I can hear what's going on the lows. My problem with a lot of subs sometimes for mastering is I don't get that feel that I get from having full range speakers, but yeah, I think you could. I think you're going to miss something, but they're not as extreme. I like the mastering speakers that I had from PSI. They were good as well. But the yeah, I mean they're a great speaker. If you've not listened to some, you need to get some and check them out, because they're the most ridiculous for their size. They sound so clear and clean. They're really good. IGS audio hardware. I've not listened to any actually. I need to. I've heard good stuff about the IGS stuff. It's probably quite good. Antonio, have I worked with the culture, the Thermiatic culture gear? Yeah, I have. Yeah, I used to have a. Did I have it? Was it a Culture Vulture? I think I had. Yeah, it was all right. I don't know. It felt a little bit. I wasn't that into it. It went. I only had it for 5 minutes and then it went again. I did buy it and then I got rid of it. It just felt a little bit. I don't know. I just couldn't get on with it. It just didn't feel very pro. I know that's really harsh because, you know, they're only a small company, and it is really pro, so I'm wrong in saying that, but it was, I don't know, I just didn't bond with it. I didn't find a good use for it that I felt it was worth the money for me, so I didn't go for it. But I know people who do use it, but for mastering I don't see that many people with that stuff, really. So maybe they're feeling the same way as me when they've tried it. You kind of bond with stuff, and if you like it then you want to keep it and you don't want to ever let it go. So yeah, with that I never felt that. How often do I use the Weisse EQ linear phase and for what purpose? I use the Weisse, although it's sitting on the floor at the moment, I'm not using it. I use that at the front of the chain before I go into my analog equipment. Oh God, the roof's about to fall in. I use the Weisse as a digital EQ going into my analog chain just to do some cuts and some shaping before going in. So that's when I use that in linear phase mode. I think it sounds brilliant. I can't wait for them to bring the plugin out. I think everyone's going to be going crazy about that, and so I'm looking forward to that. Woofu, have you ever used or tried EQ matching plugins? No. Why would I? There's no, literally, I can't understand that whole concept at all, because when you're listening to one track, it's so different to another track that I just don't get why you'd need that. It's like, why? I mean, every track sounds different, doesn't it? So how can you match one EQ to another EQ? It's weird. I always find that weird when people EQ from spectrum analyzers as well, because your track's different to someone else's. It's got different dynamics, different feel, different everything. So I don't get the comparing to another one. Yeah, you can kind of, if you listen to a track as a reference and you're playing one, then you can go, okay, that's brighter than that one, so I'll put some top on. But where you put that top is going to be different for what the track is and the instruments that are on it and their combination and their harmonics and everything. So yeah, I don't use those plugins is the short answer. Misha, which tool do you use to check if there are phase issues in a track? These tools. I use my ears. I also I just bang it into mono just to see what I lose, and I can kind of tell. You kind of know if something's phasey because you can hear it. It sounds weird, doesn't it? It sounds kind of creepy and behind you, so you can usually hear straight away if something's out of phase. But yeah, I mono things to that. If I needed to use anything, I would use a vectoroscope. You know, I use one called a stereo image thing. So that will show you if it's like flat mono or if it's got a little bit of width. So you can see the kind of, if you know what a vectorscope is, it kind of shows you the left and the right. But I don't need to use that often. A lot of the time I'll use that if I'm trying to balance a track so I can see where the balance is. But then a lot of the times with balance I'll mono it and then stereo it and then move my head until I kind of feel it in the right place. I'm very much an ears guy, so it's really important to just keep your ears sharp and listening for that kind of issues. So yeah, I tend to not rely on meters. I tend to rely on my ears, and so I tend to rely on, if I'm pushing something too high, I only use meters just to see where the gain, so see what actual level I'm hitting, and levels going into analog chains or going into plugins. I don't use any other meters really, because it's you know, you need to use your ears. Matthew, are you renaming all of your master files in Pro Tools in the album PT session, or as you go per song? I don't rename the master. If you mean the mastered files, I'll rename them. I'll call them exactly the same as what the person's track is, because I need to know that, because when I send it back they need to know that's the mastered version, so it's always underscore mastered and then the sample rate at the end. And that's just because they need to know what mix it is, and so it's exactly the same. I'm not going to rename it something random that I've decided to call it, because that won't help anybody. So yeah, I'll keep it the same, add underscore mastered so they know it's the mastered version, and that's it. And I do that when I've recorded it and it's in there, rename it, copy and paste the top, you know, the name, and then underscore, that's it. Jesse, new ones are better. Got the... Okay, I don't know what you're talking about there. You're all having your own little conversation. Aaron, it would be good to see you use the Teglia in the course, given that you are giving us all a discount. I'm not giving you a discount. I'm not paying for anything. You're getting your own discounts. But yeah, the cream's brilliant. In the hybrid mixing that I'll be doing, mixing, not mastering, then you'll see me using the cream. So you'll see it in that. Yeah, I'm not that interested in helping Teglia, to be honest. It's not like I'm on any kind of bonus. If I was, then great. But yeah, get yourself one if you want one, if you like them. I like it, it's good. Teglia, if you're watching, you can give me some money if you fancy sending me a check. Mr. Yours is arriving tomorrow. That's good, that's exciting. Let us know how you get on with it. They've got some good stuff. So Jesse, Super 15 Culture Vulture, any good? You're saying that? So I think that's about it. It's coming up to about an hour that I've been here, so I'm probably going to call it a day. Unless you've got any other burning questions you want to ask me, get them in quickly and I'll do some rapid fire. Any word from SonarWorks? No. I haven't spoken to SonarWorks, although I did the other day because the PR person hit me up, but I didn't really want to do any PR for it, to be honest. But try to do the 14-day trial to see if you like it first. Have you done the 14-day trial? Do you like it? Any suggestions on mastering console matrix? Very few in the market. What's your budget, Salvador, for a mastering console? I mean, obviously the main one you want to get, if you can afford it, is the Masalek. That's number one on the list. Number two would be, well, Dangerous Stuff's good. I didn't like the Manly when I had that. I thought that coloured the sound too much. Teglia, funnily enough, have got one that they're sending me over to listen to, so I'll have that on a review soon, so you can check that out. I'll tell you what that's like. There's Crookwood, which is a kind of customizable one that they can make for you. That's apparently quite good. I've not heard it. Yeah, Woofoo, you need the mic, but the mics are like 15 quid on eBay or Amazon. They're so cheap, the mics, so just grab a mic off there. Jackson, how do you have your setup listening routing, listening the original and the mastered? I take it you haven't reached that stage of the course yet then, Jackson, but I have a before routed to one output, so I've got two outputs on my two D to A's. So the before is routed to one D to A, the after is routed to another D to A, and then I do a level gain on the before to match the after, and then I can A/B between the two live as I'm listening. That's kind of how most mastering studios work. You always have an A and a B and some kind of gain lifter, because obviously the output's going to be louder than the input, so most studios do that. The Dutch audio one. What's Dutch audio one? I don't know that. I'll check it out though. Is Dutch as in the speaker Dutch or not? Okay, so no more questions. Let's wrap it up. It is Valentine's night after all, and my wife will obviously be desperate to see me. Not. Yeah, okay. Do you have two the same D to A's? Yes, I do. Yeah, you need to have the same D to A so that you can hear it's being the same. Have you any experience with the Gold Fluss? Yeah, it's very good. I need to do a video on it. Knife Audio, yeah, they're good, aren't they? Okay, I'm going to call it a day then. Thanks a lot for watching. Thanks. If you've got any questions, ask me in the Facebook group. Facebook group's going really well. Loving that. Please let me know if there's anything you want me to add to the course, or if there's anything missing or something you don't understand. That helps me get the course better. And then I'm going to always be adding to the course and getting it bigger and bigger and better and better. So that's going to be an ever-changing beast. If you've got a Dutch.audio, okay, I'll check it out. Thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot. Have a good night, everyone. And I'll see you next week and talk to you in the Facebook group. Cheers. Happy Valentine's to you too.